Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, first and foremost, I do want to establish something. Abortion and the decision any woman has to make with respect to an abortion is probably one of the most emotional decisions that they will ever encounter. I've had an opportunity to talk with and meet with many women who've both gone through that decision and have actually executed and had the abortion, and those who went up to the line and chose not to have the abortion. And it's heart-wrenching, and it is gut-wrenching. But we have a problem. The Oversight Committee has no jurisdiction over what the state of Texas has done. Zero. This is now the second time in this committee that we have listened to an open hearing amongst this full committee about something that the state of Texas has done through their legislative capacity in their state. You see, the Oversight Committee's jurisdiction, we are the main investigative committee for all of the committees that exist here on Capitol Hill dealing with the executive branch with the United States government, the federal government. So while we're talking about what's happened in Texas with respect to their abortion law, or what we did several months ago with the state of Texas with respect to their election law, instead of actually covering, COVID-19 and the American Rescue Plan, which are on the tabs for this committee's website, the committee has not had one full hearing dealing with either of those two issues. The committee has not addressed the growing concern and some of the growing scientific data that is coming up with respect to natural immunity versus vaccinated immunity. The committee has not heard at any time in the 117th Congress anything dealing with that. The committee has not discussed the fact that there are American citizens who are being compelled to vaccinate or they will lose their job, whether they actually have immunities from COVID-19 or not. The Oversight Committee has not brought that up once. We're not even discussing it. It's not something that's even that the chairwoman is even thinking about bringing. We've not discussed the American Rescue Plan and the very clear data that exists that the American Rescue Plan has put downward pressure on small business owners to be able to hire people to come back to work in their businesses all across the country. We've definitely not discussed the southern border and the over 1.5 million people who have entered the country illegally this calendar year. We're not talking about the children who are being trafficked by coyotes. We are not talking about the billions of dollars that drug cartels are making, allowing people to cross our southern border illegally. And last but not least, we have not talked about Afghanistan in an open hearing. And I do want to acknowledge what the chairwoman said earlier today. Yes, the committee has had a classified briefing on Afghanistan. That briefing was a joke. There was nothing that was disseminated in that briefing that you couldn't find out on Fox, CNN, or MSNBC. There was nothing in that briefing that, if you go and read other classified reports that was in the classified briefing, were not as detailed as the classified reports. This committee has not had an open hearing about Afghanistan, considering the fact that Afghanistan blew up in front of the face of the American people and the world. And instead of holding Afghanistan hearings in open session where members of this committee, who are the main investigative arm of the United States House of Representatives, I found to be laughable. We have not discussed, and I hope the chairwoman would actually hold a hearing on the fact that Marine Lieutenant Colonel Schiller is currently being held in the brig for expressing his viewpoint on social media that there must be accountability for what happened in Afghanistan. Yet at the same time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Milley, is walking around Capitol Hill while at the meantime having conversations with Bob Woodward. And the Oversight Committee is not discussing that. What happens in the life of a woman is very personable, very personal. But what the state of Texas does, or the state of California does, or the state of New York does, is what happens in those state legislatures and what those governors sign. The purpose of this committee is not to go back and second guess what states are doing with respect to their legislative power, because that is actually in direct contravention to the principle of federalism upon which the United States government was actually created and the United States Constitution was signed. The framers of the Constitution would have never signed a Constitution if it allowed this body and any other bodies to go in and second guess legislation that was signed in several states. Never would have happened. Madam Chair, we have broad authority to do so many things. I only laid out a few today. But that's what we should be investigating. We should not be going into the state of Texas. And frankly, we should not be using the committee's time to create, frankly, political sidetracks over the other issues that are existing in the United States today that the American people want resolution to, and they do want people to be held accountable for. And with that, I yield back.